Hello everyone, my name's Hayley Saunders and I head up the Business Crime and Regulatory team here at Shoesmith. So welcome to our last podcast in our 8 series of podcasts about compliance and risk management. So we've been exploring various aspects of our compliance and risk wheel over the last few podcasts, everything through from good governance to crisis management, investigations, and today we're going to talk about defend and protecting your business. So it's also a good time to talk about defending and protecting your business because we've just issued our latest annual litigation risk report, which is really good at giving us a good oversight into what the areas of litigation risk are to businesses, areas of regulatory disputes that they're facing over the last 12 months. And for anybody who's not seen it, it's a litigation overview where we ask about 360 general counsels from a range of businesses with a turnover of over 100 million from various sectors about the types of issues and risks and litigation they're facing and have faced over the last 12 months. And the beauty of this is that we've now issued our second report, so we can start to make some comparisons and see what the trends are over the last 2 years. So today I'm joined by my fellow partner, Emma Morgan, who's an employment partner and heads up our immigration team. And Emma will be sharing her insights and expertise on defend and protect as well from a compliance management perspective. So Emma, nobody wants to find themselves in the position where they're facing litigation, and a courtroom really is the last place that you want to be. What do we mean when we talk about defend and protect from a compliance perspective? What do we mean from that, in your opinion?
Yeah, so you're right, Hayley. The last place we ever want to be is in the courtroom. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So we do end up there. So when we get to the end of the compliance wheel, we are talking about defending proceedings. And that can take a multitude of forms. So that can be everything from my area, which is employment tribunal. It could be civil courts where, again, with an immigration matter. But we have the expertise across the board. So we have everything from sort of expertise in representation in coroner's courts, public's inquiries, which is more obviously your area, Hayley. But litigation can be very niche and also requires experience and expertise in specific areas. And that is really kind of shown by our compliance wheel because we have something in every area.
It's definitely not just civil or criminal or employment litigation risk anymore. There's so many different areas, as you say, of expertise within each of those.
And I think, obviously, from your point of view, there can be criminal.
Absolutely.
That can be an immigration field as well. Yeah. So we have that expertise all the way in terms of the compliance wheel. And obviously, defending can be protracted litigation, but ultimately you're obviously always going to want to get the best result in the circumstances. But it can also be enforcement action as well, so that's covered as part of the defend. And then you come and talk about protect, so that's very much about your good governance and trying to think about being prepared and proactive.
Comes full circle again.
Exactly. So we basically, whatever bit we are on the wheel, it does come back round. But it's about risk management. We love that word risk, whether it's legal risk or management risk. It's about the strategies you put in place. It's about the safeguards and making sure you have the right stakeholders and they understand the position and you look to upskill them effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look at the wheel, as you say, the defend and protect stage is almost the very much reactive, things have gone wrong, we're in defence mode, crisis management mode. But the outcome from that is we move back round into good governance and training and compliance systems and things. So it's an awful way to learn, but you can learn from litigation if you find yourself in that position, and you can come out of it the other end and be in a more compliant position. So as I say, we've just released our second annual litigation risk report, so we can now start to do a bit of a comparison in terms of what was concerning businesses last year compared to what's been concerning them over the last 12 months. Emma, can you just talk us through some of those? I think we've both got the report in front of us. Some of the key findings from this year's report and what litigation risks businesses are most concerned with.
So looking at the report, I mean, as you'd expect, I think the economy and everything that's going about, the world that we're in at the moment, it does feel like there are more disputes. And that's what's shown from the report. So it's from 62 to 76% since we last did the report in terms of the number of disputes, but also that the anticipation of those disputes. More respondents, more companies coming back and saying they expect to be entrenched in litigation for the next 3 years. And I think most of those are around IP disputes, so the intellectual property world, group litigation, obviously that's messy.
Yeah.
And then AI claims, because obviously that's a massive area for development. I mean, it's all over the news at the moment, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
And the growing volume of disputes is expected to continue. And I think that's certainly from 75% of those people that responded to the survey, that they are all concerned about this. This is something which is going to go up and up and up, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think, those 75%, they expect to be involved in some form of dispute within the next 12 months, which, is understandable.
Large proportion.
Yeah, absolutely. And going through the report, does the report help shed any light in terms of what the reasons are for that litigation? I know we touched on the economy, and you tend to see there's certain times where the economy dips and then it peaks, and then it in terms of you go through that litigation cycle when more people are fighting for money, that there's something to fight over. Does the report shed any light in terms of some of the other reasons as to why litigation's on the increase?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the employment field particularly as well, just a small section of it, but I think looking at the report last time, there was an expectation that strike action, union activity, the pressure on wages, inflationary increases would lead to more disputes in that field. I think that's come down a bit, where wages are, the pressure on wages is less. That's not to say that inflation isn't still a factor.
Yeah.
But in terms of employment disputes, it has meant that the sort of equal pay litigation, data protection is more of an area people are more concerned about. That said, union activity and strikes are still on there, because we know that people are concerned about the money in their pockets.
Yeah.
But the commercial contracts, they obviously are impacted. There's been increase in interest rates, construction costs. So you're finding that actually more disputes are arising because of that. And overall, people obviously are worried about recovering money, because money is key to all of this.
Yeah.
And if you're in economic strife, then you're going to try and fight for everything that you can get. So there's also regulatory interventions that have increased the volume of disputes. So exactly half the lawyers surveyed as part of the report said their organisation was involved in at least one regulatory dispute in the last 12 months, and that's up 36% from 2023. And regulatory disputes are common amongst a lot of respondents or people that responded to the survey, certainly in the financial services sector. And obviously things like the Financial Conduct Authority Consumer Duty Initiative, which came into force in July 2023, has meant that consumers are basically looking for better outcomes.
Absolutely.
So that has obviously increased the number of claims. So all of those are impacting, as well as the evolution of technology. So we've got AI and IP, which are basically the complaints arising from those have increased.
And they're really closely connected. I mean, just touched on the financial services one. You're right in terms of customers will complain if they feel that they haven't had a good outcome. And that's probably where some of the class action has come from, because you'll get the claims management companies that are keen to encourage those customers to complain. And if you can do it on a class basis, then that's probably one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase there. And as you say, the constant evolution of technology, which is great on one hand in terms of how AI can assist with litigation, but it's so early doors, although perhaps the creators of AI might think that's been something they've been working on for a number of years. But sometimes to us it feels quite early doors, but we're probably going to see more litigation in that space because of the risks associated.
And reliance on it.
And reliance, yeah.
You'll use it more, so you're going to input more, and absolutely the more people that use it, the more issues are going to be arising.
And you start to then work out or see what the risks are, especially I think in the automotive sector where there's a concern around the use of AI. Again, it's very good in terms of how it can be used to drive efficiencies from the manufacturing operational perspective, but you might not know at this stage how those risks might manifest themselves, and it could be catastrophic if it goes wrong. Yeah. So I think that, who knows, the 2026 report might see an increase in those types of claims.
So have you seen, in terms of the businesses you're dealing with, Hayley, in terms of an increase in litigation or costs around business crime, regulatory sector?
Yeah, I mean, our area, so as you said, we work in the criminal world. So there's the sort of financial services regulatory work, which we deal with at Shoesmiths in a different team, where they're seeing an increase in those types of claims from the criminal perspective. It's always slightly different in that from a claims perspective or civil litigation, commercial litigation, part of it to a certain extent is within your control, especially if you are the claimant. You can choose whether to bring your claim or not. From a criminal perspective, it feels far from within your control. If, it goes back to compliance. If you have good systems in place and good governance, in theory, in turn, you should avoid criminal litigation because you won't be committing the criminal offences that you can be charged with. But we go back to living in the real world, and we know that there is that constant criminal risk. So I think post-Brexit, we didn't necessarily see the reduction in the regulatory red tape or the burden that's applied to businesses that everybody spoke about at length. And all of those risks remain, whether it's from a financial white-collar crime perspective. We all employ human beings. Human beings can make mistakes in relation to whether it's health and safety, food safety, environmental mistakes. We know the landscape's changed in relation to environmental action and a lot of quite severe action being taken against the water companies. So regulatory compliance from a criminal perspective remains a concern for every business, and it definitely remains a concern for the directors, who are always normally most concerned about going to prison, understandably. So it's of vital importance, not just from a legal perspective, but from a moral perspective as well.
Because I think when you look at the report, certainly the sort of areas that are main focus are regulatory compliance, employment, but the regulatory and compliance covers so many different areas.
It's so vast. It's not, we might call ourselves a regulatory lawyer, just doing the criminal work. But as I say, our financial conduct authority team doing the claims disputes, the financial regulatory work, they will be regulatory lawyers. It covers so many different areas. The beauty is we can cover all of it for a client, but it's just so vast in terms of whether it's criminal, civil, employment, whatever it might be. Are there any, in terms of going back to the report, are there any sectors, and I know we've touched on some of them already, but are there any particular sectors that are more impacted than others?
Looking at the report, I think the financial services sector, as we've touched on before, has the highest volume of disputes and obviously changes in case law. So that is having an impact on the litigation and the large-scale litigation. There has been a dip in actions in the automotive sector, but again, it's the kind of sector which you've touched on, which is right for class actions.
And I think in relation to AI, just going back to that, as we said, it's a rapidly evolving litigation risk. And just looking back at the report findings here, which demonstrates exactly why AI compliance needs to be addressed now. So from the report, 38% of senior legal decision makers were involved in AI disputes over the last 12 months. And 54% identified AI as an increase in risk over the next 3 years. And it'll be interesting to see if that is a real risk or a risk that materialises for them. Nearly 90% believe AI discrimination presents a high or moderate risk over the next 12 months, which is a really high and interesting statistic. And senior legal decision makers believe that their boards consider AI to be their biggest litigation risk, which I always find it's really interesting to look at the report. And sometimes you can get a divergence between what the board considers to be the key risk and what the legal teams consider to be the key risk. And sometimes with AI, it might just be part of the unknown. We don't quite know how it's going to unfold and what it will look like from a legal perspective. But we know that there's a lot of adoption of AI, and it's a good thing to do it from an efficiency perspective and managing litigation. But I think it'd be really interesting to see what next year's report is.
Yeah, because we are stepping into the unknown to a certain extent with that, because we've not had anything like
You've almost got to, haven't you? If you don't move with the times and take on the risk, it's how you manage it, but you'll probably be left behind if you don't.
So I think, given this chance and the potential for litigation to arise, it's crucial that obviously we manage those risks in the best way that we can. Again, it comes back to the compliance wheel in terms of best protecting the business. It is a massive
time poor, resource poor, all of that. How can we go about some of those measures? How can we seek to avoid some of this litigation that might come down the track?
Yeah, so I think that is the biggest question in all of this. And I think the report is really helpful because it does give at the back some recommendations to think about in terms of what we can be doing. Because obviously we're talking about the massive increase in the number of businesses involved in litigation and multi-party litigation potentially. So that basically means it's going to take up more of our time as a business when we're dealing with these sorts of things. So I think in terms of the average cost of these disputes, they're talking about it being over £600,000, but that's just one average. There are disputes that are millions of pounds, and obviously you've got to be able to effectively manage that. And the problem with getting to this point of the wheel is that you are so reactionary, and what we ideally want to do is head off those disputes earlier on. So I think one of the things that came out of the report is that a lot of businesses felt that they were not properly prepared to manage these kinds of risks. And I think that 49% of those that responded said they hadn't done these preparedness reviews. Yeah. I really struggle with the word preparedness, but being proactive about it. So I think my main thing about this is proactivity. So I've had clients where I've said, do you know how many claims you've got? Have you got a claims register? And they're like, no.
Basic things.
It's a basic thing. You need to know what disputes you've got, what potential disputes you've got, what contracts you've got. But you also need to think about what your priorities are, what is important to you. So that will then lead into your discussions about what you fight and what you don't fight. So reputationally, is that your biggest concern? CSR, greenwashing, supply chain issues. What is it that will inform your decision, I suppose, in terms of dealing with litigation? But also when you get into that field where you're actually fighting those battles, keep close to them, understand what's going on. So how much is it costing us? What is really the value of the dispute? What is our reputation from actually fighting the dispute? Because that can say a lot about actually where your dispute's going to lead. Because unfortunately your way of dealing with something can often have reputational impacts. But also looking at the emerging risk, and we know that AI is a big risk, but so is competition, employment. The majority of disputes are actually looking at this report basic. I say basic.
Yeah,
breach of contract.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily these complex AI issues. Taking it back down to basics, again, we're talking about breach of contract claims, which you think you would be able to sort of risk plan and see where those disputes might be. But on top of that is building your understanding. Where are you vulnerable? What can we do to address it? Upskilling. I mean, I talk about that all the time, particularly in light of employment law changes coming up in the next 2 years. We've got an employment bill that's kind of riding through all the legislation we've had. We've had hardly any change for years. Now is the time to be upskilling, to be thinking about your investment budgets for training, to make sure that the people that are managing or making decisions further up the food chain know what they're dealing with. And that comes into investment, both in terms of people, but also in terms of systems and tools that you can use to prevent disputes, but also manage disputes better.
Yeah. And it can be a challenge, can't it? Because it's expensive to invest in, the time, the people, the resources, the money, everything that you need to invest in compliance. But the return on investment is you then shouldn't be in this defend and protect position because you are so prepared. And I know certainly obviously we're coming at this from a legal perspective, but alongside the legal support that we offer from a compliance perspective, and for the benefit of the listeners, from a Shoesmith's perspective, we have Shoesmiths 8, which is the operational assistance that we can provide. So there's a variety of non-legal operational services that we can provide to clients to help them with these problems. They aren't necessarily legal problems now, but whether that's dealing with a subject access request and all of the data and information that has to go into that, AI comply in terms of navigating these long-winded, horrendous regulations in terms of if you use AI, how you go about it and how you can put your business in the best position to avoid that risk.
Yeah, and protect and basically put a kind of risk strategy around you.
And it's that protection that you can do early doors, because you're right, you just don't want to be on the receiving end of enforcement action and that being your time and opportunity to do something about it, because you simply won't have the time to proactively manage it as well as dealing with the reactive stuff.
And again, and as well as those products, we've also got the ability to put training proposals together. Because fundamentally, a lot of this is about investing in your people and making sure that people recognise those risks, but also help manage those risks as well.
Absolutely. That's been really helpful, Emma. Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to cover from the risk report that we haven't mentioned?
I don't think so. I think in terms of the employment field, certainly there's a message seems to be the increase in disputes. Employment is still high up there.
And in terms of rights bill is...
And when we've got the employment rights bill coming along, I know. So I've just done a quick little webinars on that,
Very good. And there's all of the other stuff. As I say, this is just defend and protect as part of the wheel. We've got good governance, investigations, crisis management. It's really that focus on all the proactive stuff, putting these systems in place which we can help with, depending on what the business need is, the sector, the area of law, whether it's legal, whether it's operational. It is what we can assist with to get clients and business in the best position possible.
Agreed.
Who knows, we may not have a defend and protect section anymore because we might get rid of all of this.
Avoid all the litigation.
Risk. But no, it'd be interesting to see what next year's litigation report considers and produces from a litigation risk perspective to see if it's changed.